A good life is a life built around fulfilling work, play, relationships, and lifelong learning. Welcome to Good Life Conversations, where we explore the stories and strategies of inspiring everyday people who are striving to create a life of purpose, meaning, and connection. Hi there, welcome to this Good Life Conversation. My name is Jay. I'm your host and the founder of Discover Year, and today's guest is Maraika De Groot. Maraika, welcome.
Hi, nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Okay, so like all of our mentors, Maraika is an interesting person, has an interesting life, and I look forward to diving into a number of things. One of the things that's very interesting is that Maraika is currently the Director of Operations at Maven Consulting. It's May 2004, and she will be no longer in that position in a few weeks' time, actually. So that'll be an interesting topic to discuss, why she chose to leave, what she's doing next. But Maraika has a deep background in engineering and does not do engineering, which I also think is very interesting to explore. So we'll talk about that. And Maraika's got coaching skills as well, and she works in human resources, even though she did a lot of studying in engineering. So Maraika, we can jump right in. And the same question we always start with, if you wouldn't mind, tell us about what a day looks like for you. What time do you wake up? Do you have any morning rituals? What do you do for work? How much do you usually work in a day? What else do you do? If you do other things, how do you wind down? What time do you go to bed? Tell us a bit about the typical day in your life.
I love this because normally when you get asked this question in a job interview, you just talk about work, not the full sort of life cycle of your day. So for me, I love sleep. So number one is making sure I get my 8 to 9 hours of sleep. And if I could get more, I would take it. And then when I get up, I need some wake up time because I always say I'm not a morning person, I'm a day person. And so I function best in the day and not in the morning and evening. And so I get up and I have a shower and on all those hygiene pieces. And then my next step is I actually meditate in the morning. So I use an app where there's a little bit of movement and then into meditation. And that's about a 20-minute period for me. And after that, I bring my food that I'm going to take for the day and I get to walk to work, which is a real treat. So it's about a 15-20-minute walk to work, which again is a time that I actually might call home and talk to my family, or I might keep it for myself, just depending what I want. At work, every day is different. So it's never the same. It generally has meetings and then some sort of planning in it. And then just depends on what needs attention that day. And happy to dive into that more, but every day is different. And when I get to the end of the day, many different ways my day can go. Either I walk home with my partner and we just make dinner. Some days I go to different evening events. And other days, Matt and I are really into running. So we go to a track and we go do a workout or something like that. Typically wind down my day by escapism of a good TV show or a book and fall asleep after reading a few pages. So that's what my day looks like.
Okay, great. Thank you. 8 to 9 hours. That's great. So what does that mean about what time do you go to bed and what time do you get up?
I generally am going to bed. Okay, I get to walk to work, right? So it's not a long period to get into the office. So I'm generally going to bed at 10:30 and 11 and getting up at 7.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And you found, is that by trial and error that you figured out that's the right amount of time and the right time for you to be sleeping?
Yeah, I guess that's a great question. I think trial and error, I've always liked sleeping. And as soon as I notice I have I'm less effective during the day and I hate that feeling. And so I prefer to let myself sleep until my body would naturally wake up. And so when you have times where you don't have commitments, you kind of test it out a little bit and you see where your body naturally lands. And I generally land around 8.5 hours.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Thank you. And we didn't mention at the top that you live in Vancouver, specifically North Vancouver. So I thought about you walking and I immediately envisioned, are you walking with an umbrella? Of course, those who haven't been there maybe don't realize Vancouver, quite a bit of rain, precipitation. So do you walk to work regardless?
Regardless, yeah, that's the answer. And I have what I call my own personal rain tarp, which is a very large, long rain jacket. And I prefer a rain jacket to an umbrella, just I'm not sure why. I will forget an umbrella. Like I've left umbrellas too many places,
Mm,
whereas a rain jacket I will continuously put on. So I've got a great rain tarp that's much bigger than most people rain jackets. So
yeah. Okay, I like that idea. The rain tarp, definitely a good piece of equipment for Vancouver in my experience. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, interesting. So you get to walk to work every day, and would you say that so as we mentioned, you're going to be finding a new role, new career
Mm-hmm.
soon, and would you say that walking to work is going to be something that you are going to
Mm-hmm.
try to accomplish again at your new place of work?
I definitely like walking to work, but I have commuted in the past and it has been about 45 minutes to an hour commute. I actually like the commute time, but I generally do it on public transit because I prefer not to be driving. And so if it's hybrid and I'm only going into the office 2 or 3 days of work, I actually like the commute time because I sit there and I'll read a book, or I will use that time to text all my friends back, or plan a few things. And so one of the things I found when I moved to North Van and could walk to work, I was actually missing this little bit of time I was using quite productively. Um, so so the answer is it doesn't matter so much for me because I like both of them and for different reasons. And I just kind of have to adjust what I need to create time for based on what scenario I'm in.
Great, thank you. It's not a deal breaker.
No,
And that leads me to the question, what will be a deal breaker for you
mm,
when you're looking for a new role? And perhaps maybe that's a secondary question. If you could maybe start by telling the audience, what do you do as director of operations at Maven Consulting?
yeah. So I'll start there. I always say it's like running your own lemonade stand. I think how I've described it before. So essentially, it's all the things you need to do to keep the business running. So that could be, hey, I can't be there on Saturday. I need to ask Joe to come and stand in for me. So it's human resource and recruitment. It can be, oh, the neighborhood doesn't know about my lemonade stand. I need to put up posters. So it could be marketing, all those things that kind of keep your business going. In my world, it's consulting and it's in the engineering space still. It's basically providing services, people who charge out on an hourly rate to clients that do infrastructure. So it's cities or utilities. And so my day to day is running human resources and IT that allow people to kind of do their job well. And then also making sure they do it safely. So having a really great safety program. So that's what my day to day kind of looks like. I think in terms of what I'm looking for next, I really enjoyed my role and I've been in it for close to 4 years. And I would say I've learned a lot. It's a smaller company, so there's about 50 people there. I'm ready to either scale that up. And so I'm working for a larger company where I like to say I'm doing less of the doing and more
Mm,
of like the managing and advising and reviewing or coaching. Because I really think once you get into a bigger leadership role, you're doing a lot more coaching.
mm,
Um, I think so. So the role is non-negotiable. So that's one role I could have. The other role is I'm really passionate about change management. So change happens, like it's going to happen in any business, but how you do it and doing it thoughtfully is what engages people and makes change easier, I would say.
mm.
So kind of the role is non-negotiable. And then the other non-negotiable for me is the culture. Like if it's not a great company culture, then I don't really want to be there. Is what I
Mm.
would say, because I think that's what leads to productive teams and really good work. And it's again something that I'm really passionate about. And part of a good culture is being cognizant of people's well-being and taking care of that within your workplace. And then the last, you can't leave out compensation. Like what you make is important too. And willing to be flexible within some range, but also, don't want to take a giant step back. And so
Mm.
what is that would be the third one, I think, for me.
That's so great. I would love to home in a little bit on the idea of culture, and if you could share, looking for a good culture, what does that mean to you? What are you looking for?
Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be unique to every single person, right? And it's what your values are. I think often in a workplace, you're looking for your values being reflected in what the culture is. And that's also what builds up the culture, is where you have those shared values. Um, so on my end, I really value collaboration and teamwork. And that's where you all come together to solve a problem. And I think that needs to be paired with the idea of respect, which is that everybody's going to come with a different opinion and they all need to be valued in your decision of how you move forward. So those would be the kind of grouped together. And then, yeah, I think the last I already had said was well-being. So it's just, we're humans, right? Like, yeah, it's a business that needs to make money, but it's a business of people. And so I think treating the workplace a little bit more like a community for me is what I care about, because if humans are happy in their jobs, then it's going to be a more productive workplace that has a better outcome. And so to me, it's about integrating those concepts of well-being. That just comes down to really good management of people, I think, and it's using modern ideas around managing people. So that's what it is for me for culture. It's bringing in well-being and having a place with collaboration that adds in respect and ultimately results in inclusivity.
I think a great question for our audience, our students who will meet you soon. I think a question that they might ask is, how do you go about finding out, before you start working there? It's a question a lot of us ask ourselves. But I'll be interested to maybe hear what you might tell them about how you can test in the interview process and doing your research, how you might find out what the culture is. And to be frank, I have no idea how old you are, Maraika, but you are not just out of school. You have 3 degrees in engineering. So you studied for a long time, including a master's in management, innovation, and art entrepreneurship. So having had a good amount of experience in the workplace, you've chosen to change careers. And I'd love for, that reinforces a lot of our messaging to students that people change and do new things and you continue learning. Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to depart and what you're excited about, what you've learned about yourself in your working life to date?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start first with like, how do you decide what is a good culture when you're in the recruitment? And then I'll move to that second piece if that works. I think it's not easy is the answer. I don't think you're always going to know. I think you're just going to have to take your best educated guess. As you go through your career, you're able to maybe pick up on some soft pieces of what's not being discussed in your interview process and to ask those questions. But I also think it's where this concept of network really matters, because you can often find some sort of degree of connection of someone who's worked there before and have an impartial conversation about what it's like. And so that's, to me, what I'll probably go about is listening very closely in my interview process for what's not being said, and then seeking out some people who work there to see what it's like, and what maybe challenges they experienced and what they loved about it. And then the last is research. Glassdoor and stuff will give you a great idea, and that will actually give you an idea of questions you can ask in your interview process. So those are my 3 things, and we'll see how they go. And I'd love to hear from others what their experience has been. I guess, so what led to me being departing, and then also what I'm excited about. So led me, I guess I had shared with you, Jay, I think we had a leadership change about 6 months ago, and my role has changed, but also the company culture is changing. And so there's 2 elements to me. The culture is changing, and so my values are just not in alignment as much. In my role, I'm often the face of a lot of decisions that affect the individuals. And so because it's not aligning with my values, it means that I'm always a little bit more stressed. And so I don't want to be there. I want to be a productive, healthy, happy person. And so it's putting me in a place that I'm not enjoying as much. And the second thing is, because the company hasn't grown as quickly as I would have loved it to have been, my role is kind of stagnated a little bit. And so I'm interested to kind of go off and take what I've learned and apply it elsewhere. So that's what I'm excited about, kind of seeing what I've learned and applying it elsewhere, and then continuing to grow on that. I'm excited about feeling a little bit more like myself again. I would say I've probably been in the burnout phase, and you kind of feel a little bit more disconnected from yourself. So I'm excited to kind of take a step back and explore what I want to do next and what is going to excite me next, more fully. And yeah, excited to have some free time to just explore a little bit. You
Mm.
know, it's a gift because as you become more of an adult, I will say those free hours start dwindling away. And so whenever you've got them, you start feeling like it's a gift that you don't always have there.
Oh, I like those gifts a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't have them that often, but I do really enjoy them much more now. So, um, if you don't mind, I'm curious. It sounds to me like there was this stress. So there are decisions made in the organization. That decision comes to you. You don't necessarily agree with it or feel like you would want to do something
Mhm.
else. And that feels stressful because you now have to share that decision with other people and they are perceiving that you made the decision, or at least you're the conduit to, and is that in part at least what led you to feeling like you were burnt out?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I say also the culture, like just generally the culture change, like how we were working together was different than it had been in the past. I think I felt like my expertise weren't always as respected, maybe in the same way too. So a lot of factors that
Mm,
are a little hard to entangle because they end up just being one big hairball, let's say,
mm,
right? Where they all
mhm.
kind of get together. But what you shared there was definitely one of the major contributions.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. I think it's really important to for young people to hear like things are messy and you're doing a pretty good job of like taking apart part of this.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's easily done when you have no experience in the workplace at all, right? So it's things that we learn over time. I think that's a really important message to reinforce. And I expect you'll learn more new things wherever you go next.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and that was actually one thing you had said. What have I learned from this experience? And I'm not fully sure what it is yet. I think one of the things I hope to recognize is just a little bit more where my limit is for next time, and know how to communicate it a little bit more too. Like I think I've done that a bit, but it's been a trial period this time, and so now I've built up the skill set to be able to use that in the future. So yeah, I'm actually excited to see what more I learn from it once I get back from it about 2 months
Hmm.
from now.
Yeah, so having the time to reflect on it a little bit with a little bit more time available and not being in the stress of the job currently, you think that'll be helpful?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. And okay, I won't quiz you anymore on this stressful piece, but I'm excited for you, and I think it's really cool to demonstrate to young people, this is not sitting well with me, and then to respectfully but with confidence say, okay, this is no longer for me. I think that's a great model to share.
Mhm.
And you, I think, are the second, if not more, mentor who moved from Ontario to British Columbia to the Vancouver area. And so I know why the other person did that. And I'm curious to know what called you to BC. Why did you move out there?
Yeah, I've moved out here 3 times, and I always say each time was a combination of love and work. So it was never just one reason. The first time I moved out here, actually, as a summer student for a 4 month period of time, and it was really that the job and the company I was attracted to was based in Vancouver, and my partner at the time, his family was based in Vancouver, so it was a really great opportunity to kind of get to know his life, but also work for this company I was really interested in.
Hmm.
Once I graduated, I moved back for the exact same reasons, and so continued to work with that company. I was a summer student and worked there for 5 years. Um, and then the last time I moved back was I'd actually went to Ontario again to do my master's degree. Lived in Toronto for a little bit. COVID happened, and COVID happened when I was actually planning to move to Australia because my partner then was Australian. That didn't happen. We were prepared enough. I didn't have our visas in or anything like that to try and get there. And so we had to go with plan B, which was stay in Canada. We had both met in Vancouver. We loved it there. So we decided to move back. And I had applied to my job at Maven, which at the time when I had read it, it was like my dream job description of what I wanted to do, and got off the plane because I'd already decided we were going to move there. And 1 hour off the plane, I got the phone call for the first round interview. So
Mm,
I feel like it was kind of meant to be to move back there.
that's very cool. Very cool. Um, And I would love to hear a little bit about, so it sounds like, work brought you there and then relationships played a role. I would love to hear you studied engineering for a really long time. And then it sounds like I don't want to say that you don't enjoy engineering work because obviously you're still in the engineering world, but I know that you kind of had this shift in perspective on what the nature of the work you wanted to do. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Why did you study engineering and what happened to help you understand that you wanted to not necessarily be an engineer per se?
Yeah, it's so fun. You always evolve, right, as a person. So I started in engineering, I think for two primary reasons. One, it was very accessible to me because my dad has an engineering company run out of my house. So I was just around engineering all the time as a kid. The second reason is I really love like math and science. And I thought for a while about being a mathematician, but it's very theoretical and I like applied problems and problem solving. And so it made sense as my next step to go into engineering. So that's probably the two reasons I went into it. I studied geological engineering, and that was just because in first year we had a general year and you could decide your discipline. And earth sciences was just fascinating. I'd never learned it before. I was like, yeah, okay, let's study this. And I loved that it was a combination of a bunch of sciences in one, and you could do field work and be in the office. And the types of problems you solve are really interesting. You don't decide on the materials to then pick the project. You're stuck with like the rock that's there and you've got to design around it. And so it's a different type of problem solving, that type of engineering. So loved that. And then studied and worked in geological engineering for 5 years. I worked on designing large earth-fill dams, worked in the Dominican Republic, worked in northern BC, worked on the construction of them as well as the computer modeling of it. And so really got to try a variety of different working arrangements through that. Learned like I love interacting with people and the communication and the coordination. Learned I could do the stability modeling and I was really good at it because it's super detailed oriented. And I did not have fun with it. Like it was kind of boring near the end. And people were like, here, Maraika, you can do this. You're really great at it. And be like, yeah, I can. Okay, I'll do it then. So it gave me that opportunity to just kind of try a bunch of things. I think too, when I was in the workplace, like it was really natural to me to say, oh, well, why isn't this person talking to this person and sharing this information? And why isn't the process designed X this way? And to me, these things that were really innate weren't for other people. And that's where I kind of learned, okay, I'm more interested in business operations. So that's kind of how I ended up into engineering and also how I kind of decided what I liked and didn't like. And I worked at a place where they allowed you to experiment with different things. So I worked on IT projects, and that wasn't my background. But because of them being a little bit more flexible, I took on side projects that really showed me what I love to do.
So my initial understanding or assumption was that you did engineering and eventually realized you didn't like it as much and then changed. But what I'm now understanding, I think, is that you still like a lot of engineering, but you realized there was this additional kind of strengths or skill set that you had that you were better served to not necessarily be doing the engineering work, but within the engineering environment.
Yeah, exactly. Like I love what engineering brings to our world. I think it's a really important profession, but doing the detailed work is not the space I want to be. So I think like the roads aren't there with engineers. The bridges you drive across aren't there without engineers. Your house is not there with engineers. Like there's so much we depend on that engineering gives us. It's just I wasn't suited as much to do the technical work.
I don't think there's anything else in the world for me that I would like to do less, but have as much awe for, like the skyscrapers. And every time I see a building or every time I'm in a plane, I think, how is this even happening? How does that thing stay like that? And the wind, and you even see it like moving sometimes. And I think these people are geniuses. So I think it's amazing. And I think one of the messages here is that we can be good at things and not enjoy them. And
Mhm.
that's a kind of a trap, I will say, that sometimes people get stuck in because they will get good at something and people will tell them they're good at it, and that feels good. So people will keep going with it, even though under the surface they sometimes realize they don't actually enjoy it. So I think
Mhm.
that's just a really important message to extract here for the audience, that you can be good at something and not care about it enough or not be motivated by it. So you might want to change paths in those cases.
Yeah, I agree. I had this great keynote speaker that once said, strengths aren't just things you're good at, it's things you're good at and you like to do. Because if you don't like doing them, then you're not motivated to do it. So it's really not a strength for you in the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. And if you don't mind the question, I hadn't thought of this before, but you have lots of engineering background. Most people are aware that engineering, at least traditionally, has been dominated by men,
Mm.
by males for the most of time. I'm curious what your experience was, if that perhaps was the case or not for you, and how did that play out? What did you learn about
Mm.
this kind of idea of, gender roles, that kind of thing in the workplace?
Yeah. So it's something I think about a lot. And the reason is my thinking is evolving every step in my career with this topic. If you had asked me in my first 5 years, I think I would have said, oh, I get special privileges because of it, which is true. I would go to a mine site. I'd be one of the very few females there, and people would offer to help me things that they would never offer to help someone else with.
Mm,
And they like the kitchen would save a special cake for me and behind and stuff like that, right? Like these little privileges that
mm,
came from it. I actually worked in the finance industry for a little bit, and there were two reflections that came out of that. One, I just thought about my personal security in a different way. So I reflect back into my mining days, think about me being in an office on night shift all by myself, doors aren't locked, like something could have happened, right? Like my own personal safety
mm,
wasn't necessarily taken care of there in that way. My other experience in the finance industry was just actually how forward engineering was to actually talk about women in engineering, because it's not talked about in the finance industry. And so I find the finance industry is actually 20 or 30 years behind often
mm,
the engineering space. Because at least in engineering, there's women in infrastructure groups, women in consulting engineering groups, and are really trying to have support there
mm.
to change the diversity. And then now in my career, I think with being a leader, I'm more and more vocal about inclusivity. And it's not just women versus men, it's also newcomers to Canada, right? Which is a big thing right now, figuring out how we integrate newcomers to Canada within our spaces. Um, and I think it really comes down to processes, I think, that allow for inclusivity, really great leadership that's open to hearing and respecting the different decisions. And that kind of comes back to this culture piece. Once you get into a leadership role, it's a little bit more about how you operate than it is and how you make decisions. And so if you're just making decisions from one context, and let's say you're two white men in your 40s, you're one perspective, right? That's not bringing in a diversity of perspectives in your decision making. So often now I'm thinking about how decisions are made, and are they being made with an inclusive sort of lens to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a long answer, but I kind of go through different iterations where I reflect on it differently. And I would say it's still hard, and it actually gets harder in leadership roles than maybe where I was before. I don't know what that means for me yet. I can just notice it's harder, and I notice I'm really passionate about it. So.
Hmm. Do you mind, is there any kind of words that you could describe to use to say, like, how is it harder? What's more difficult as a leader in this situation?
Yeah, I think, how is it harder? There, your decision making space depends on your role. And so on my end, I have great decision making space on hiring processes, let's say, right? But I might not have the decision making abilities when it comes to like the overall company budgets, let's say. And so um, the different levels have to be aligned, i.e., shared values with how decisions are made. And
Mm,
so you can't always influence up in that way necessarily. So I think that's where it gets harder is if you're not aligned with how leadership's making decisions, it's not necessarily easy. You're not going to change someone, right?
yes.
um, so I think that's where it gets harder, and I don't know what the solution is to that yet, right? But there are barriers to kind of maybe creating it what you want it to be or what you think it should be, because it's a group that's making these big decisions.
Yeah. So is this kind of relevant for all leaders or specifically for women leaders in this space? Are you kind of
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Is this specific to gender, you think, or do you know?
I I think it's uh, dependent on the individual. Like, I don't really like amounting things to gender because it's all about who you are as a person, and it's about how you make decisions and how self-aware you are as an individual. Now, are there cases where some genders might be better at it than others? Yeah, that's probably true, right? But I would say I like to think about it more at the individual level, and it just happens to be that there might be some gender preferences within it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always appreciate hearing from new people, different people on this topic because we talk about it a fair amount at Discovery within our team, and I do think I have a limited scope. I feel like a lot of the things I hear men in particular do, I don't do myself. I don't think, and I don't think the way I'm told that people think. So it's helpful for me to hear, smart people who have varied experience describe their experiences to me. I'm sure our students will be interested to hear perhaps more as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for asking about it. It's a hard topic. So
Yeah.
I think being willing to ask questions and listen, like that's where it starts. So
Yeah. Yeah. One piece of advice I often try to share with our students is be mindful about who you're asking to tell their story to you and who you're asking for advice. I know I'm
mhm.
very mindful of that, and I think it serves me well. And I'm looking for people who are smart and honest and thoughtful. There's a variety of things I'm looking for, my values, when I'm asking people.
Yeah.
So I would love to know a bit if thank you for all that. That's really great and interesting. And there's a few questions that we'd like to get to maybe in a little bit more of a rapid fire way as we're kind of coming more to the end here. One of them is you've talked about your people person. You
Mhm.
enjoy you've mentioned relationships and at work and your personal life and how important those things are to you. So I'd love to hear if you have a lesson about relationships that you've learned
Mhm.
since you left high school. What is something that you perhaps didn't anticipate that you've learned about relationships?
There's two things that come to mind. The first, actually, you had commented on in previous conversations, which is like my relationships always come back, I find. So it's like you have a good relationship with someone, 3 years later, you might have a reason to reach out to them and you reconnect in a different space. And like, I love that when they come in and they leave and they come in and they leave and you reconnect at different parts in life. And so I think having good relationships allow you to do that. And the second one I've been reflecting on recently is just like, you go through life and you forgive different things in the past that bothered you. Like I think of some relationships with friends and even my sister where there were times of tension, and through time you kind of forgive those and they wash away. And then you have really great relationships that strengthen your relationship in a different way. So those would be my two.
I really like that second one. Oh, I like both of them, but the second one is interesting to me because I don't think it's come up yet really in this way, but I also connect with that. I think it seems like a lot of people sometimes want to make a decision about, I'm in a relationship or a friendship with this person or not. And what I've found for myself is sometimes, to connect to your first point, just stepping back for a while and not interacting with the person, giving them space, giving yourself space. It doesn't need to be we're in or we're out. Sometimes time can heal.
Yeah, agreed. Time's beautiful in its own
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. We haven't chatted much other than you moving to Vancouver. We haven't chatted about travel, and our students, usually like to chat about travel. So could you tell us your favorite place you've ever traveled to and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I've been lots of places. There are two places that come to mind. I can't just choose one. I'm a two person, I guess, today. Um, the first is the Dominican Republic. I was working there, so I got to engage with the community in a different way. I learned Spanish while I was there.
Mm.
And so I think also it's like a second world country, so it's really different. So I think that was great. And it gave me a lot of confidence to travel in a different way too. And then the second is for me going to the Netherlands. My family is originally from there. My dad's done a great job of staying connected with my second cousins and third cousins. And I've been pen pals with one of my third cousins since I was 8. And so I go back and visit, and it's like always this really wonderful, like delicious homecoming, even though I've never lived there.
Mhm.
And so having that connection to your history is really cool.
Thank you. The Dutch, I worked for a Dutch company, Holland America cruise ship, and then I worked at the Richmond Olympic Oval in Vancouver, where, of course, many people know, but not everybody, that speed skating is very popular. It's perhaps the most popular
Mhm.
sport in the Netherlands. And I would love to hear your perspective on the culture, which, Dutch people are known, and I experienced that they are very direct, very honest. That's the main point that stands out to me, and I would love to know your perspective on the Netherlands.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of explaining it. Whenever I go, my cousin says, "You're so nice. You say sorry all the time. What's that about?" Right? Because like they are direct, and what Canadians perceive as politeness, for them, it's different politeness. I think their politeness is like they're incredibly thoughtful. Like they will go out of your way to go pick you up, or go out of
Mm,
their way to like plan a dinner, or so the way that they're polite or welcoming is just different. It's not with words. I find it's a little bit more with actions.
mm.
Um, yeah, so it is different. And then otherwise, yeah, I just find they're more thoughtful. I don't know how else to describe it. Like I'll go and my cousin will reach out to a cousin on a different side of my family who they have no relationship, and she'll plan a dinner for us.
Mm.
Like totally random. She has no reason to do that, and she will. And so it's kind of incredible the thoughtfulness that went into that.
Have you heard of the five love languages?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you're making me think of that, and the acts of service,
Hmm.
compared to, let's say, words of affirmation, and like on a cultural level, I don't know, maybe there's research on that. I've never heard of it, but that's really interesting. I haven't heard it described that way before.
Yeah, it could just be my family too. You don't know, right? Like this context is a little bubble. So
All Dutch people out there, you now have to be thoughtful and you have to organize dinners for people you don't know. That's the standard. Many of us go there. Okay, thanks, Marika. I could ask you a lot more questions, but this has been, I think, hopefully really thought-provoking for the students, and I know they'll have good questions for you. But to wind down here, I'd love to end with the same question that we always like to end with, and that is that we live in a world today where young people are growing up with technology, most people since they were very, very young, and they often look into a screen and see a world that is not very realistic and sometimes downtrodden and difficult to kind of navigate. So in this new world, what advice would you like to offer to the young people listening and our students at Discovery Year to help them live a good life?
hmm. I guess first thing is not everything happens on your phone. I think you often need to spend time on the inside, which is what I love about this program, is it's a lot of time on self-reflection. I don't think that happens necessarily through watching Netflix. It's or playing a video game. It's taking that quiet time to yourself. So carve a way for that to exist is what I'd say. Can be writing, it can be meditation, it can simply be going for a walk, but carve your time away from technology just to get some insight in yourself of that. And that's where you notice like when things are working and not working, and when you can adjust. Without that time, you can't really take the space to then make improvements. So carve that time out for yourself.
Is sorry if you don't mind a follow-up question, is part of your time to walk to work? How do you normally get that type of time for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's like meditation. It's conversations with friends, right? Which I guess could be through technology. So for me, it's meditation, it's running, it's conversations with friends. Um, that those things come forward. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. I think it's important for young people to hear that there's a lot of different ways to become mindful and to achieve some of the benefits of meditation. And it doesn't always just involve sitting down and not moving. For me, it's movement. It's
Mhm.
athleticism, sports, running, biking, swimming, lifting weights. So I think it's important for them to hear that.
Yeah, agreed.
Marika, thank you very much. This has been great. I learned some new things about you, which I really enjoyed learning about, and I appreciate you making the time.
Thank you. Always enjoy our conversations, so appreciate it as well.
Okay, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we hope to see you at the next Good Life conversation.